Okay. All right. So this isn't new news per se, though some of it we're going to look at is. But this maybe is literally everything that's wrong in the Republican Party and even just the right wing in general encapsulated into like one thing. I don't know if there's like another race happening right now or political like event that makes me more like angry than this thing. Like how this happened, I don't know. I don't understand who's advising this man. Whoever's advising this dude, like I really would love to know whose idea was it for Trump to give Dr. Oz his blessing. I really don't understand how this came to be, but we're going to look at a few things about it and also look at his contender because, spoiler alert, textbook Republican Party nature, we actually have like an epic, awesome contender. We have a like epic, super base contender that scares the Republican Party. So they bring out all the normal, like all the regulars to come castigate this individual and attempt to make this individual look extreme or radical. Yes, the right-wing hosts, all the regular candidates are doing this. So let's look. Okay, so April 9th is when Trump gives him his endorsement to Dr. Oz. Again, kind of strange. So this originally would have been Sean Parnell running for the seat, who was another American First, seemed to be fantastic populist candidate, had to drop out of the race, personal reasons, was going through a divorce. And we ended up with McCormick and Oz as allegedly the front runners. And so Trump ends up giving his endorsement to Oz. Now, the reason for this being that allegedly within a few days, as there was immense criticism and everyone wondered why this was taking place, the reason was Kathy Barnette will never be able to win the general election against the radical left Democrats. She has many things in her past that have not been properly explained, and basically the claim that she's not going to be able to be a viable candidate against what the left is putting out. Now, again, this methodology has been a losing methodology for like 40 years. I don't know why we're still doing it. I really don't understand this at all. This like, oh, look, the left has a radical freak. So the way we're going to counter that is let's go find like a passive, agreeable person that is kind of adjacent to what we think the center left wants, and let's run that guy. And that's what you got with Dr. Oz. I mean, that's exactly what we got with Dr. Oz. And in fact, I wouldn't even say he's like center left. Well, let's look. I mean, we can look at his position going back. His position on transgenderism, for instance, was way ahead of the curve. For instance, here.
Child is transgender. What would you do? Our lives as parents are first defined by the words, it's a girl or it's a boy. Could you make a decision to let your child live as the other sex, even alter their body? It's an area of intense debate. Today you'll meet families coping with this astonishing reality.
What does it mean to be a boy? What does it mean to be a girl?
So easily define
Those two
things.
simple questions
Just for the record,
are infinitely complex and gut-wrenching for
they're
parents
not.
of children who
They're
are
not
born
infinitely
transgender.
complex or gut wrenching.
Girl, and I have a penis.
8-year-old Josie was born Joseph. Physically, she's a boy. But from the time she could talk, Josie knew she was a girl.
So okay,
Her
so
sex on the outside.
we don't need to play any more of that. It's another 14 minutes of this with Dr. Oz affirming the concept of transgenderism in youth and providing puberty blockers. And this was like this video. Let me see if they have a date on when this video was released. Yeah. This is, I mean, a decade ago. This is when the public and for sure the right squarely knew our position on this and that we were absolutely against it. And here's the thing with our party. Our party will be the Conservative Party. The only future of our party is the Conservative Party, not generic right wing, not generic right adjacent left. So the party will be the Conservative Party. The right-wing party will be the Conservative Party, or there will be no party. If there isn't a Conservative Party, then you'll just have two very degrees of progressivism, and there won't be any need for the right wing. There'll be no need for it. It'll fundamentally disappear. You're either going to embrace conservatism, and conservatism has attributes of morality that are easy to follow because they're fixed and they don't change. They don't change over time. We can look at them whether it was now 10 years ago or 20 years ago and know positions, especially on gender roles, and the fact that we aren't going to accept some form of like dualism in which that your soul and your body are these two separate things. You're intrinsically linked. You are a male, you are a boy, then you'll then be called to become a man. This is very simple for us in the Conservative Party and on the right. How we have a Senate member that doesn't understand this or thinks it's profoundly complex is, to me, profoundly complex. So what happened here is Trump says that she cannot contend Kathy Barnette, who we'll see is epic. Kathy Barnette is entirely our girl. This is who we should have our entire support behind right now. So Kathy Barnette, Donald Trump said there's no way he could run against the radical left, which again, I don't understand this policy of, well, there's a super radical candidate on the left. So, the way we're going to beat that, by running like a super, super neutral candidate on the right. And that way, all the people that support the left might come to us. I mean, this concept just doesn't work. We've been trying it for decades. It doesn't work. The way that you win is we have the numbers on the right. You go give somebody a candidate to get excited about. And you give somebody a candidate to get excited about on the right, and they're going to vote for them. We saw this with Trump. He gave the people a candidate that they were excited about. And what happened? They turned out in record numbers. It just so happened that the other candidate got 45 quadrillion votes. But we gave somebody a candidate they could get behind and get excited about. Instead of giving them these milquetoast, like neutral losers like Dr. Oz. And I don't understand why they still don't get this. Why we're still doing this. It's so maddening to me. This is like peak boomerism. Like, hey, you know what? Maybe if we run Dr. Oz, the New York Times will say nice things about Republicans and we'll get converts from the left. Who cares? We don't need those converts from the left. We have plenty enough people on the right. You just need to give them a candidate that they can all get behind. If the Republican Party can do anything smart, they would go find every single person in the rural part of the state that didn't vote in the last election and go say, hey, what can I do to get you to the polls? And then introduce them to Kathy Barnette. That would win. Okay, so Donald Trump gets a horrible advisor, which I'm largely suspect on who one of these advisors may have been. We'll see this in just a second. I think one of the people swaying this decision has a post that's going to be relevant here in a second. But what's interesting is, so two notable moments on this Kathy Barnette that definitely couldn't win. We see today, 26 and 23. It's awful close, and it's trending. I mean, these are going to be the two contenders, obviously. But here's the big kicker. So Trump nomination happened here. And we saw is over the next 3 days, 4 days or so. Yeah, so next 5 days, we'll call it. He gets his nomination out, and we see this immediate bump in Dr. Oz, who otherwise had been relatively boring. Kind of flatlined. He gets a bump from Trump. We can't attribute McCormick's bump or the meteoric rise of Barnette on this. Just we have a public event, and everybody gets a little bit of a bump. And ironically, Oz gets the smallest of everybody's. And here, so this one can't attribute to Trump. We move forward. boom, little bump happens here, 1.5%. This is the day of the Trump nomination. And then when it looks like he gets a bump, and then people even still after that are like, yeah, we're not crazy about this guy, but we do like this Barnette woman. You see down here, see what happened to Barnette. So Trump comes out, reiterates his statement here. Let's see where we go. Trump comes out, reiterates his statement here on the 12th. And what do we see? It reflects then in the polling. So we see a little bump within the next few days for Dr. Oz, who then flatlines again. It really seems, and then this is just typical in the run up to the end, everybody's kind of shaking out, making their decisions, and we see the split. And usually the contenders kind of break apart from everyone else. This is to be expected. But so what's interesting here is I honestly believe almost the entire bumps that we've seen for Dr. Oz. So if we subtract this last week, which is people jumping ship on McCormick, Sands, Bardos, and choosing a real contender. Sorry, guys, but, real contender. I think the other bumps that we can see are directly attributable to Trump. And were he to have given those to Barnette instead, it would make up the difference. It would certainly put Oz almost down barely above McCormick, definitely Barnette in the running lead. And I honestly believe that if we had put steam behind Barnette early on, it would be meteoric and these other people wouldn't even be close. And I think she's a candidate you could get people to rally behind. Instead, we picked Dr. Oz. Who's excited about Dr. Oz? Nobody's excited about Dr. Oz. The left isn't going to vote for him. They're going to hate you. They will hate you forever. Bryson Grace said it right in a song the other day. They already hate you, so let's make them matter. They already hate you. You're not going to get them to like you by running like a neutral candidate and calling them a Republican. We already tried that. We just tried that a couple of years ago. We did it with the president, the orange man. They hate him. They're going to hate him no matter what. So we should have ran somebody that everyone would get behind, and that would have been Barnette. So let's look at this a bit more. So how did this shake? So yeah, Trump comes in, supports Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz, let's look at even recently position on abortion.
What is your position as both a doctor and a senatorial candidate on when life?
Also, sorry, this is from the Young Turks. They just had the best clip of this interaction, so I ended up picking Young Turks clip. So, forgive me.
Begins. When should we draw the line when abortion is legal?
As a doctor, I appreciate the sanctity of life. And for that reason, I'm strongly pro-life. With the three exceptions I've mentioned, that's how I would vote.
And when does that life begin?
Generic pro-life.
Again, if I'm pro-life, then it's a decision that comes back to the sanctity of when you think life does begin. And I believe it begins when you're in the mother's womb.
When
you're in the mother's womb, but that carries you all the way up to 9 months of pregnancy.
No, of course not. Life's already started when you're in your mother's womb. But it's a rat hole to get trapped in the different ways of talking about it. We need, as a nation, to make sure the Constitution is appropriately followed, and people like me, and you may be in the same camp, who are pro-life, have our feelings respected. And this is something that should not be taken away from us by judiciary legislating from the bench.
Not have children
killed. But that's also something that's going to have to be legislated, and that answer is going to have to be given specifically.
Correct.
Fumbling and bumbling. I learned nothing. If I knew nothing.
She has great makeup, by the way. All right. So Dr. Oz, it was 15 minutes talking about transgenderism. We covered this. So what I think took place on this Kathy Barnette situation, actually what we know took place and part of what we think took place, I think we ended up with some of the usual candidates that were fairly close to Trump that just gave him really bad advice. And I think one of them was this guy right here, Rick Grinnell. We see as Kathy Barnette, as it started to become clear that she was going to be an actual contender and the Republicans would have an actual conservative that was actually American First running, immediately they started to get worried because that's the thing that apparently worries the Republican Party, that they're going to get a candidate that might actually believe their platform positions too much. So what happens immediately? They immediately start to scramble of how can we discredit this individual? Yeah, that's literally what the Republican Party does. So I believe one of those individuals, which this article is great, it's entirely full of fear porn of the right wing. actually calls Miss Barnette a where is it here? This is great. Yeah. Let's see. It says, hang on, I gotta find this closing line because this is great. Let's see. Barnette and Mastriano candidates who would blow up the American experiment with their beliefs in the big lie election theories and erasing the lines between church and state. Yeah, good. Are good under the pretext that they mean it. Like, if you're watching this, you probably don't need me to explain what the premise of separation of church and state was that, the federal government, it was a letter from the Danbury Baptist Church, who was like hyper charismatic and would do all kinds of crazy stuff out in the street. And they asked Thomas Jefferson, do you expect a time which in a letter, this wasn't like enshrined into law at the time, but was a question of a founder. Do you expect a time in which the state will interfere with the matters of the church? Which Jefferson said no, meaning the state wasn't going to interfere with the matters of the church, which is, effectively targeted legislation by the Democrat Party every single day now. But anyways, so she would blow up the American experiment with their beliefs about the election lies and are erasing the lines between church and state, and they're poised to ride a wave of extreme voter discontent. Like, if they begin calling you a Christian nationalist, like, that's almost always going to be our guy. Like, that's just how this is going to shake now. It essentially just means that you might generically believe in America's heritage as a Christian nation. That's literally all they mean by Christian nationalists when you hear that. Also speaking to you, Tim Keller. All right, so let's see. So all the usual suspects, though, which I will show you, come out immediately to make sure that this candidate is not going to be our candidate. So, for instance, and this is where I actually strongly think Trump may have gotten his information from. Richard Grenell, who was director of national intelligence for a while. Remember, keep that in mind as you watch this clip. Tell me if you think this is a accurate clip or an accurate portrayal as you're even just watching it, how it's cut, the speed and the shortness of the clips. Tell me if you think this is a fair way to analyze a candidate.
Dismantling privilege and classism in America today.
The reason for so much unrest in the Black community is because of white racism. Black Americans feel disenfranchised. Systemic racism, specifically among police officers. I recognize that there are inequalities still throughout our country. I have the blood of slaves coursing through my veins. White racism. Blessings. Bye-bye.
Kind of weird, right? Like, not even kind of weird. That's like epic weird. And this is being suggested by a dude that understands how information operates. Like, so you know exactly what you're doing with this clip. This was a very, very strange, weird, shortcut clip to somehow tie a woman who's overtly anti-BLM to this whole systemic oppression narrative. And because they know that it doesn't resonate well with the right now, which is good. That's actually, in one sense, a good thing that it's trending that direction. We're pulling out of this like nosedive that the right had kind of started to join the left in. But they don't want this candidate for some reason. And again, I think it's they get stuck in this like, if we'll just be nice enough, the New York Times are going to like us, and then maybe the left will join us, which, as we've said, we actually don't need. We have the numbers. We just need to go give them candidates. It'll make them excited to vote. And also, okay, so this is a exception to boomers. Boomers specifically. I love you. I love tons about you. But specifically to boomers, I don't need you to be politically involved. I mean, unless you want to. I'm not asking anything of you in this, next 20 years of your life, except for understand that the voter game now is different, and understand that essentially every reasonable candidate is going to be called crazy or called a freak or something along these lines by our media establishment. And that includes, unfortunately, Fox News. And I'll about to show you this right now. That's also going to include Fox News. Fox News hates you. The organization itself hates you. I mean, they've constructed a decent product that is reasonably well. It's the best that you've had on the right to watch for the most part. But the people that own Fox are progressives and they all hate you. And so they're going to be fine with putting up Bruce Jenner, you know, as a transgender on their show, but they're going to make sure that you're going to not get a candidate like Kathy Barnette. So this clip, yeah, Grinnell, I think this is very likely where Trump got his information from. This here is interesting. Yeah, so here our Fox News favorite always is
primary
Hannity.
season, she tweeted, there's a lot of tweets, quote, primary season, she tweeted, there's a lot of tweets.
Oh, there's a lot of tweets. There's a lot of what does this sound like? Tell me, which party does this sound like right now? We look back through their tweets in 2015, and there's a lot of them. Okay.
Tweets, quote, did you see the last presidential debate? Trump was horrid. Followed up that with, Trump is just as liberal as Democratic leaders we currently have in office. Morality matters, and Trump does not rank high in it. She also wrote, Trump is good for beers and barbecue, not as a president, and claimed that Trump's moral character is questionable. And by the way, she even tweeted this about me, and there's me, and says, oh, Glenn
Might be
Beck,
why Hannity doesn't
actually,
like her.
Glenn Beck, why does Hannity support unprincipled Donald Trump? And it gets worse. More resurfaced tweets are even more disturbing.
It's so
One
disturbing.
from her Twitter account in 2016 reads, quote, don't we get it? Obama is a Muslim. And there are lots of these tweets. From another 2013, she says, please pray for my babies and me. We're about to board the plane to California, and there's a homosexual female, and linking out to a Facebook post. Moments ago, one of our producers spoke to Kathy Barnette. She claims she cannot recall the context of the tweet about Obama or any of the other controversial quotes. And when we asked her about the tweet about boarding the plane, she said to our producer, quote, I would never say that. Those are not my words. I don't know if she's claiming that her Twitter account was hacked, but it's on her official Twitter account. So with only 6 days left in this campaign, there are serious, real, open questions about the surging Kathy Barnette campaign and where she truly stands on issues.
Where does she truly stand on issues? Okay, so, one, this is funny because this is the guy that they're always going to call, right? Like, they're like, it's like a few days out from the election. They're like, Handy. And he's like, yeah, what you need? And he's like, you need me to call somebody a great American? They're like, no, this is too cringe. We need you to make sure an actual America First candidate doesn't get a fair shake. And he's like, yeah, on it. And so, and unfortunately, again, my beloved boomers, they watch Hannity. They all, like, there's a big class that watches Hannity, and they hear this stuff. They hear this candidate's maybe extreme, maybe said something mean about, you know, the GAE, and they're going to now make sure that we get Dr. Oz, who can't define when this life becomes sacred, which is conservative. This is really easy. Again, it's another one we got to quit. There's not, like, there shouldn't even be a heartbeat bill. Like, it's really, really basic. As conservatives, we have one reasonable position that we can have, which is that life begins at conception. That's the only position you can have as a conservative. Anything beyond that will always fail. It'll inevitably always fail. It's why it's been such a losing argument for so long, because anything outside of life is sacred, period, is a failing argument. Okay, so here's this funny. So Dr. Oz. So look at. Tell me this whole thing. Let me see if I can find the date on this. Where's the date? Okay, May 15th. Rich Grinnell's post. Let's see, May 11th. Let's see, Hannity, May 11th. Oh, that's really interesting. May 11th and May 11th. Wait, you mean like? Hang on. There's another one here if I can find it. Anyways, there's another article. I forget where it dropped. But essentially, magically, May 11th, a whole bunch of anti-Barnette stuff drops. The problem is it didn't resonate, as we see here. People didn't care. And so that's when they realized, like, again, as I say, it didn't affect at all. So that's when they had to launch Trump into the mix and try to get, I'm sorry, May 11th. So they realized what was happening. Look at the meteoric rise. So we go from May 3rd to May 11. So look, you can see they got scared. They saw right away that Oz is low energy, as somebody that the right isn't going to be excited. They're going to lose. They'll probably lose this election if they get Oz because nobody's going to be excited about him. So then you get Barnette, and look what's happening, because people are like starting to check this woman out, and they're like, dang, this chick is based. And we get here, and then magically, on this day, everywhere at the same time, Hannity, Grinnell, and so Fox starts to be apprehensive, and you start getting the usual candidates to come out and say that this woman's she's so extreme, just like they do with Pat Buchanan. Again, we should have Pat Buchanan. If we had Pat Buchanan as president, we'd probably be in an entirely different nation right now, one that's far better than where we're at, but we didn't. So again, we have to learn to correct from this. We have to learn not to let these media, like establishment shills, determine the direction of our party. It's our party, the conservative party. It's going to be our party. It's not going to be Hannity's party. It's not going to be McConnell's party. It's not going to be Rubio's party. It's going to be our party. So, Ultra MAGA long shot roars in contention in key Senate race. Let's see. This is when people started to get nervous. What was interesting here was, again, so here we go. Kathy Barnette faced questions about her background and made scrutiny from conservative outlets. And this is what's important, conservative outlets, because that's who began criticizing her. I mean, the left, it's easy. They'll criticize everybody on the right. But when the right, all the conservative establishments are coming after her. And again, there's nothing that like is remotely reasonable. Why? Because she can't defeat a radical Democrat. I mean, this quite literally is exactly who you pick to defeat a radical Democrat. This is that candidate. And then you get a weird cut clip from Grinnell. You get Hannity coming out and saying, well, she said all these mean tweets about... She said a mean tweet about Islam or homosexuals or something. So, there's no room for that in the Republican Party. And so, Oz quickly decides that he's pro-life now. And what do we see here? So this is really interesting. So great article if you want to see. So this article actually is pretty great and talks a little bit about the background of Miss Barnette, that is like in the pro-life argument exactly who we want right now. Says she was a product of sexual abuse. Her mother was raped, I believe, is the conversation, and being a product of that realizes that this has no effect on the value of life. She's from rural Alabama. Like, this is so our person. It disturbs me to no end that the Republican Party continually does this, like over and over and over and over. So what is she like? What's one of the main things she's hugely on critique for right now? It's actually awesome. Is that she arranged for not one, but two, and working on a third bus to go to DC for January 6th for the rally. So of course, that's the huge slight against her, according to the Republican establishment. And this meet Kathy Barnette, pro-life, anti-BLM, pro-police, conservative Republican running for Senate in Pennsylvania. This article, this is the one I meant to say. Don't read this. This one's okay, but this one's way better. Here you go. Washington Examiner, May 16th. So today. So this article here, when we look through at our candidate, So two talking points Democrats repeatedly use to attempt to defend abortion are that abortion bans are detrimental to black women, and abortion bans are unfair to rape victims. And Barnette's racial background and life story help neutralize such attacks, whereas her Republican colleagues wouldn't be left politically vulnerable. Now, I don't really care about this argument in politics, but I do love the fact that she is very vocal about this. I am the byproduct of a rape, Barnette said in a previous interview. My mother was 11 years old when I was conceived. My father was 21. I was not just a lump of cells, as you can see. I'm still just a lump of, I'm still not just a lump of cells. My life has value. I mean, again, there's literally nothing that you could possibly find that I have seen that would deter us from this being our candidate. It's beyond maddening to me. That we continually do this, and we're gonna pick Dr. Oz. Why are we picking Dr. Oz? So if you were apprehensive or had any questions, because the conservative establishment continues to tell you, so Fox News, Hannity, Grinnell, whatever, keep telling you that there's all these questions we have unanswered about her. Remember, we saw this right over here, Fox News article, questions about her background amid scrutiny. They keep telling you as if it's like there's this secret that you don't know. So Barnette, so you can go right here and we can go meet Kathy. Meet Kathy Barnette. Hang on here. I had this things you want to know. So, and it goes through basically every single claim that's been launched thus far by, again, the conservative media. Name of her hometown. Where was she an adjunct professor? Judson University. Was she an officer candidate school? Kathy was accepted into officer candidate school. She went through the rigorous process of applying, being vetted, interviewed. She was accepted. She did not finish the program because she got married. Actually, that's, if there's an epic reason not to go through officer candidate school, it's because you're a woman and want to get married. Kathy's never claimed to have graduated officer candidate school, but vetted candidate. Okay. Financial institution she worked at, A.G. Edwards and Sons and Bank of America Capital Asset Management. After graduating from Troy State University, when did she move to Virginia? This actually was a typo in a book, Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain, Being Black and Conservative in America. Kathy and her family lived in Pennsylvania for 9 years. She graduated from Troy State University. Yes, her BS degree in finance. Military service, there's the military service records, because again, what happens is, so you get handy, it's like, there's a lot of tweets to look at. We don't know for sure about her military record. So anyways, here you go. Other things you may want to know. She is, here you go. Okay, so Grinnell, you have some explaining to do with your fast clipped video. Kathy Barnette has never supported BLM Inc. or their calls to defund the police. Never is capitalized and in bold letters here. This is another good one. So then they started bringing up the fact that she suggested that she put up a Change.org campaign petition to put a statue of Barack Obama kind of adjacent to the Emancipation Memorial. And if you go read this specifically, it's actually not like the worst of ideas. I mean, whether you like him or not, obviously I'm not a fan, but whether you like him or not, he was a president of ours and he was our first black president. So the concept of having a statue with the emancipated slave looking forward and seeing the first black president of the United States is kind of a beautiful concept. I'm most certainly not against this concept at all. And then with, I think it was Booker T. Washington was going to be looking on, seeing basically like the representation like over time of his life's work. And again, this is a beautiful concept. This is exactly what our memorials and statues are supposed to be. Like, whether I specifically like Obama or not, the concept of memorializing the fact that you went from emancipation to a president of the United States and, a little bit over 100 years, and then having like a notorious like abolitionist looking on and seeing the the final projection of his work. I think this concept is beautiful, and I'm not sure why this got any critique. There's literally no reason to critique this idea, and it was a way to preserve our current statutes, and that's even what she says here, is that there were being calls to get rid of the statue, and this was a great way to memorialize the statue and embrace a potential future of a a multiracial America and what this could look like. So this, again, is another nothing burger by establishment, right? And yeah, so this should entirely be our candidate. And it brings up, again, literally everything that's been wrong with this party for like, I don't know, 50 years, 60 years, at least 50 years. Every single thing wrong with the party encapsulated in this one race. We have a more than viable candidate that the right will get behind, and the establishment is more worried about being liked by New York Times and maybe potentially getting like 1 or 2% of the vote from the left. So meanwhile, they'll probably leave. I don't even. It would be entirely hyperbole, but I will throw a figure out there. We're gonna leave a margin of like 20-30% probably on the table of people that would vote for you on the right, that are going to look at the option of voting for freaking damn Dr. Oz and go, why? Like, why would I even do this? If I was in Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz, like, what does that get us? What does that get us as conservatives? Like, okay, so winning an election is not the same as politically winning and establishing political power for things we want to do on the right. These are two different things. Republican Party has for way too long thought for some weird reason these are the same thing. I don't know if it's because they're literally working in concert with the left, if it's as Steve Bannon thinks that there truly is like essentially an established uniparty, or if they're just like practically retarded. I don't know. It's one of those three, but this is a like premier example of, we have a candidate that is like, so this is like so our girl, and this is who, if you're in that state, you need to be voting for. And all Republican establishment, these are the candidates you should be supporting. And you see it in the meteoric rise, even with basically like no assistance from like establishment or Trump. This candidate is surging in a viable contender from literally nothing. You know why? People like these populist candidates. The right likes them. You know who they don't like? They don't like establishment candidates, and they don't like people like Dr. Oz that were literally the pinnacle of transgenderism and still at this point can't even define clearly what they mean by being pro-life. Listen, if you can't define what you mean by being pro-life, like really coherently, you're not pro-life. It's really simple. So vote Kathy Barnette. But if it's too late or you're not in Pennsylvania, just know this is what's fundamentally wrong with the Republican Party. Until we fix this, until we're willing to embrace actual American first, actual conservative candidates who maybe said the wrong thing on a tweet 10 years ago or whatever, we're going to keep losing. So, let's fix this. Let's get actual American first candidates, the ones that the media call like terrible, evil Christian nationalists, and let's get literally all of them into office. And then once we do, we will use our political authority for good purpose, because again, remind you, the opposite of using political power for evil is not using political power, but using political power for good. So let's get American first candidates, whether the ones that the media likes to denigrate, get them into office, the ones that you can get people excited about, get people behind, use political power, and retake all these institutions.